Brachos Daf Chaf Aleph continues the discussion about a Balkari, one who saw a seminal emission, as regards to saying Shema. The Gemara at the end of the Daf will pick up the discussion as regards to Brachos HaMazon, saying the Bracha Midaraisa after food. In between, the Gemara discusses Brachos HaTorah and Brachos HaMazon, the Doraisa versions of the Bracha. The Gemara discusses somebody who has a suffix whether he said Shema or not, somebody has a suffix whether he said Shema Esrei, somebody who comes into shul in the middle and he cannot catch the entire tefillah should he start Shema Esrei or not, and a couple of other halachos. So let's begin the Gemara. We had seen in the Mishnah at the end of the daf before that the halacha is that somebody who is a Balkari, so a seminal emission, should think the words of Shema. The Gemara wondered if thinking is not as good as speaking, what's the point in that? And Brachos Daf said so that you should keep up with the congregation. So the Gemara says, hold a second, let's get to the bottom of when we need to do this. We have three things. We have Shema where you're supposed to think it. We have Brachos HaMazon where you're supposed to say it. What about Shemona Esrei, Tefillah? So the Gemara establishes you should not say anything at all or think anything at all. You have no obligations to Tefillah if you are a Balkari. What's the proof? The Gemara says because it says in a Brisa that somebody who's in the middle of Tefillah and remembers he's a Balkari should shorten the rest of the Tefillah. He shouldn't stop. So the Gemara says, but that seems to imply that if he didn't start yet, he shouldn't start. So now we have, for a Balkari, he should think Shema, do nothing for Tefillah, and he should say the words of Brachos HaMazon. So what's the rule here? So the Gemara tries to say that maybe it's about whether it has all Malchus Shemayim or not. Shema has all Malchus Shemayim, and Tefillah doesn't. So the Gemara says that can't be because Brachos HaMazon doesn't have all Malchus Shemayim in it, and yet you say that. So the Gemara's final decision is that it has to do with whether it's Doraisa or Derabanan. Shema is Doraisa, Brachos HaMazon is Doraisa. Those two you should either say or think. Try to keep up with the Tzibor, and Tefillah is Derabanan, and therefore you don't have to do anything for Tefillah. Now the Gemara discusses the bracha on Brachos HaTorah and the bracha on food. So the Gemara will concern itself now with the bracha de'oraisa. These two have brachos de'oraisa. So the Gemara says, first of all, how do we know that Brachos HaMazon is de'oraisa? The Gemara says, like it says, v'yachalta v'sevata uverachta. The pasuk says you should eat, you should be full, and then you should say the bracha. How do you know the Brachos HaTorah is de'oraisa? So the Gemara says, Ki Shem Hashem ekra havagoydel le'elokeinu, call out to Hashem when you are bringing greatness to Him. So now the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan wants to say that the bracha d'oraisa, which we know for Brachos HaTorah, is before you learn, and the bracha d'oraisa for food is after you eat. Rabbi Yochanan wants to say, therefore, we should be able to extend each one. You should also have a bracha d'oraisa before you eat and after you learn. What's the extension? So Rabbi Yochanan says a kavachomer. Learning must be greater than eating because it has a bracha before and eating doesn't. So if eating has a bracha after, learning should for sure have a bracha after. And the Kavachomer works the other way as well. Eating must be greater than learning because it has a bracha after and learning doesn't. So if you have a bracha before when you learn, you should certainly have a bracha before midaraisa when you eat. The Gemara rejects it. The Gemara says eating and learning both have something about it that makes it better than the other, and therefore you can't learn a Kavachomer. It's a pircha either way. What's the pircha? Learning is a spiritual pursuit. It brings you olam haba. You can't learn from Brachos HaMazon to that. And you can't learn from that to Brachos HaMazon because Brachos HaMazon has hana. So if you have a bracha on Brachos HaMazon, doesn't mean that you should have one for learning. Then the Gemara also says, by the way, if you look at the Mishnah, you see clearly that you only have to say Brachos HaMazon after you eat. That's the only doraisa. Brachos HaMazon, a bracha on food before you eat it, is not doraisa. The brachas which we make are derabanan. The Gemara now moves on to discuss one who is not sure if he said Shema or not. The Gemara says, if you're not sure if he said Shema or Emes V'yatziv, you only need to say now Emes V'yatziv. You don't have to say Shema. What's the reason? The Gemara says, you only have to repeat that which is Doraisa. Safek Darabanan Likula, Safek Doraisa L'chama. The Gemara says, hold on a second. Kriya Shema is Doraisa. It says, B'shach B'cha Uvkumecha. The Gemara says, no, that's not talking about the mitzvah of Shema. That's talking about the mitzvah of learning Torah, which is mentioned in Shema. The Gemara says, well, I'll prove to you that Shema is Doraisa, because it says that somebody who's a Balkari has to think the words of Shema. Doesn't have to think the words of Emes V'yatziv. Obviously, Shema is the Doraisa, and Emes V'yatziv is Midar Banan. The Gemara says, no, really, Emes V'yatziv could be as the Doraisa. But once you thought the words of Shema, you already did the main thing. You did Kabbalah's all Malchus Shemayim. That's what was Doraisa about Emes V'yatziv. And therefore, you no longer have to do Emes V'yatziv anymore. But somebody who's not sure if he said Shema or emes v'yasev. It only needs to say emes v'yasev. It doesn't need to repeat Shema, because emes v'yasev contains the mitzvah d'oraisa of mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the Gemara asks if the entire point of Shema and emes v'yasev is that they both contain Yetzias Mitzrayim, Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, so just say emes v'yasev. Why do we have to say Shema? Versus no, Shema is better in a sense because it also contains Kabbalas al Malchus Shemayim. So the Gemara now quotes another Shita. The Gemara says that if you forgot whether or not you said Shema, Rav Elazar Amar says you should repeat Shema. But if you forgot whether or not you daven Shemona Esrei, you do not say Shemona Esrei again. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. Rabbi Yochanan says Shemona Esrei. You can say Shemona Esrei whenever you want. You should repeat it all day, even if you said it already. There's no problem to repeat it, and therefore you should definitely say it now. The Gemara then quotes Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel says two halachas which indicate that you can't just say tefillah whenever you want. You have to have a valid reason for it. Halacha number one is somebody who's in the middle of Shemona Esrei and realizes he already said Shemona Esrei, so you should stop right then and there. So the Gemara says, hold on a second, but we have a different halacha. Somebody who's in the middle of Shemona Esrei on Shabbos and he realizes he's saying weekday Shemona Esrei. He should finish the bracha. He shouldn't stop. Why? What's the difference? The Gemara says it's very different. Shabbos, you were really supposed to say the weekday Shemona Esrei. Chazal shortened it so that you should have less tefillah on Shabbos. You should be able to go home and enjoy the Suda. But really, it's a correct thing to be saying the weekday Shemona Esrei, so there's no reason you should stop. But somebody who already said Shemona Esrei, now he realizes that he's in the middle of Shemona Esrei again, he has no reason to continue. You should certainly stop. You can't just say extra Shemona Esrei whenever you want. Second halacha, Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel says, is somebody who comes into shul and he finds that the tzibur is already praying. Should he be mispal as well? So he says only if he finds something to add to his tefillah that he didn't say yet, something else to ask for, be mispal for. The Gemara says, why do I need these two halachos? Both of them seem to indicate that you cannot say Shemona Esrei whenever you want. So one of these would be enough. The Gemara says, no, each one has a chiddush. I might think that if you davened b'yechidus and now you come to a tzibor, it doesn't count like you davened, so you should be able to say Shemona Esrei with the tzibor, which is a whole different thing, a whole higher level. That, Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel says, is not true. And the other thing is that you're already in the middle of Shemona Esrei. I might think you should just continue. So on that, Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel said, no, you should stop. Having spoken about somebody who walked into shul late or is behind the tzibor, the Gemara now asks, what if somebody's behind as far as Shemona Esrei? When should he begin late? If he starts late, he's going to miss Kedusha and he's going to miss Maidim, and he obviously won't be able to interrupt his own Shemona Esrei to answer. So which of those does he have to say, and he should not start his own Shemona Esrei if he's going to miss them? So it's a machlokes. Rabbi Shua ben Levi says he has to be able to make a Kedusha with the tzibur if he starts now, and Rav Huna says he has to be able to make it to Moedim. What's machlokes? Mar says machlokes is whether a yachid, a single individual who is praying in the presence of the tzibur, says kedusha in his Shemona Esrei or not. If he says kedusha, you don't have to worry about missing it. But Moedim, you certainly can't miss, because then even though you're going to see your own Moedim, when the tzibur is saying Moedim, you're not going to bow and you will look like a kafir. So now the Gemara makes the point that you do not say Kedusha unless you're together with the tzibur. The Gemara says, why not? The Gemara says, because it says, V'nikdashi b'soich b'nei Yisrael, and it says, by Kairach yibadu mitoicha id hazois. The word toich appears in both places, so you have to have a tzibur for Nikdashti, for Kedusha, just like you had by Kairach, where it says Eida, and there you needed 10 people, so for Kedusha you also need 10 people. Now the Gemara says, one thing we see clearly from here is that you're not supposed to interrupt your Shemona Esrei to say Maidim or Kedusha. So the Gemara says, should you interrupt for anything? The Gemara quotes Rav Dimi and Rav Yehuda and Rav Shimon, Talmidei Rabbi Yochanan, who said, you don't interrupt for anything except Yehei Shmei Rabbi. Yehei Shmei Rabbi, you could say in the middle of Shemona Esrei. Then the Gemara concludes that that's not the halacha. The Gemara now returns to the Mishnah where we had the halacha that Rabbi Yehuda says that a Baal Keri can say the bracha before and after food. So the Gemara wants to know, how could Rabbi Yehuda hold that way? The Gemara says he doesn't hold it with the halacha that a Baal Keri is not allowed to say holy words. How could he not? We have a drasha which teaches us that, which is from the juxtaposition of two psukim. One says Vaydatim levanecha v'levnei vanecha, which refers to learning, and one says Yom Asher Amadata lefnei Hashem lekecha b'choriv, which refers to Har Sinai. I have a drasha, just like by Har Sinai they couldn't have tumas keri, so when they're learning they also can't have tumas keri. They have to make sure to go to the mikveh first. So how could Rabbi Yehuda argue with that? So Gemara says, well, maybe Rabbi Yehuda does not hold that you learn halachos out of juxtapositions of psukim. He doesn't hold of smuchin. Gemara says, well, hold on a second. Even anybody who doesn't hold of smuchin, doesn't learn out of halachos out of psukim that are put near each other, but in devarim, chumash devarim, we do hold of smuchin, and even Rabbi Yehuda does. The Gemara says, and this limud is in devarim, so that wouldn't work. So now the Gemara is going to take a detour to prove that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of smuchin in the whole Torah, but in devarim he does hold of smuchin, learning halachos out of a juxtaposed psukim. So the Gemara says, in Kol Torah Kula, how do you know that he doesn't hold of smuchin, close psukim? Because as far as the halacha of mechashefa lo yisachaya, the halacha that a witch gets skila as its form of the death penalty. So how do you know that halacha? So Ben Azai learns it out of the juxtaposition of mechashefa lo yisachaya and a different pasuk talking about somebody who lies with an animal. Just like somebody who lies with an animal gets skila, a mechashefa also gets skila. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I don't hold of that smuchin, and that's the point the Gemara wants to bring out. Rabbi Yehuda gives a different source. He says that oiv v'yadaini, which is a certain kind of witchcraft, is clear that it gets skila. Why was that spelled out? There's a cloud that any thing which is part of a group and is singled out for certain halacha to teach you that halacha applies to the entire group. That's how we know that skila applies to all forms of witchery and witchcraft. Anyway, we see from there that Rabbi Yehuda does not hold of a drasha of smuchin. That's not in Chumash Devarim, but in Chumash Devarim he does. How do you know? Because Rabbi Yehuda's shita is that someone is not allowed to marry a victim of his father's oines umafata, his rape or seduction. And Mara says, how do you know that? From the juxtaposition of the pasuk discussing forbidden relationships with one's father's wives or women. And so close to that, it talks about the isser of oines, rape, mafata, and seduction. So you see from there that the two are connected. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda does hold of smuchin. So anyway, we're back to the kasha. We know that Rabbi Yehuda does hold of smuchin, which is, again, the drasha of close psukim in Chumash Devarim, and this halacha of Baal Keri not being able to say Kiddusha is in Chumash Devarim. So the Gemara wants to know, why does Rabbi Yehuda not hold of this halacha? So the Gemara offers the following solution. Could be that Rabbi Yehuda uses that smuchin to teach us something else, to teach us the limud of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, who says somebody who teaches Torah to his son, it's as if he's mekabel Torah from Har Sinai. And he uses those psukim, v'yidatam levonecha, and yem asher amalta lefnei Hashem lekecha b'chayrev. The Gemara now continues exploring the shita of Rabbi Yehuda and tries to prove that Rabbi Yehuda really does hold of the halacha that a Baal Keri is not allowed to say words of Kiddusha. The Gemara brings a brayso which discusses the following halacha. What is the story about someone who's a Baal Keri, but he also has another tumah on him, and that tumah doesn't come off by going to the mikvah? Is this person obligated to go to the mikvah before he speaks words of Kiddusha or not? What are the three examples? Someone who's a zav and a Baal Keri, mikvah doesn't take off zav until after 7 days. Someone who is a nida and a Baal Keri, and someone who was a Baal Keri and then became a nida. Now, how does a nida become a Baal Keri when she expels the seminal fluid from the body that makes her a Baal Keri as well? So in these three cases, the tefillah would not work on her nida or zav or his zav status. It would only work on the keri. Is it required or not? So the Gemara quotes a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda says tefillah is not required for the keri. The Rabbanan say it is. So the Gemara now says. So you see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda says that keri is required, because otherwise why is he discussing saying that it's not required because there's another tumah here as well that doesn't come off? Obviously, otherwise Rabbi Yehuda holds that it is required. So Gemara tries to say, well, maybe really Rabbi Yehuda holds that tefillah for Baal Keri is never required. The only reason why here we're discussing the case where there's another tumah as well is to show you that the Rabbanan hold that even in that case tefillah is required. But the Gemara rejects this, because one of the cases is where she was first a Baal Keri and then she became a nida. So why do you have to say that case? If the Rabbanan already said a case where the other tumah besides keri was there first, and then she became a Baal Keri, and even so, she's still chayiv to take off the keri by going to the mikvah. Certainly, if the keri was there before the other tumah, she would be obligated to take that keri off. That keri thing had to be removed before another tumah climbed on top of it. So why would that case be mentioned? It must be that case is not a chiddush according to the Rabbanan. That case is a chiddush according to Rabbi Yehuda, that even in that case, she is pater and doesn't have to go to the mikvah, even though the carry was there first, and before she became a nida, she had to go to the mikvah for the carry, but once she becomes a nida, you don't have to go to the mikvah for carry because it's no longer significant because it's overshadowed by the nida that she has, which won't come off by going to the mikvah. Bottom line, we see that Rabbi Yehuda is clearly is speaking about this Mishnah specifically, where he does not have to take off the carry, but otherwise, in a normal case where a person just has carry and no other tumah, they would be chayev too. So we have here a clear indication that Rabbi Yehuda does hold of a carry. And we're back to our question: why does Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah not say that a bal carry is restricted from saying Brachos Hamazon?